There's an election in June, and one item you'll see on the ballot, beside the vote on whether to recall SF District Attorney Chesa Boudin, is a charter amendment called Proposition C, and it has to do with recalls too. So here's what it's all about. Proposition C, at its core, wants to make recalls in San Francisco harder to come by. To that end, it's proposing two things that would shrink the recall timeline. A third piece of the bill has to do with the mayoral appointment that results from a successful recall, and how much power that appointee should actually have. So let's get into the details. First, Proposition C seeks to extend the ban on the initiation of recall petitions from 6 months to 12 months after the official has assumed office. Essentially, this means anyone interested in launching a recall needs to give that elected official at least a year in their job before submitting the very first recall paperwork, up from half a year. Next, the proposition seeks to prohibit the submission of a recall petition if the subsequent recall election would be held within 12 months of the standard election. I know that's a lot of jargon, but essentially what that's doing is shortening the window within which a recall can actually be launched. And finally, the proposition also wants to change what happens should a recall be successful. Currently, the mayor appoints the replacement of a successful recall, and that will stay the same, with the catch that the replacement can only serve as an interim officer and not run as a candidate in the subsequent vacancy election. Essentially, they'd be more of a caretaker. So what's all this mean in real life? Let's look at the school board recall. In February, 76% of voters who turned up at the polls chose to recall 3 San Francisco school board members, in a recall that took place 9 months before those officials would have faced the voters again in a standard election. The creators of that recall say, had this proposition been in effect, they could never have pulled it off. The timeline would have been too narrow. They also argue that it doesn't seem fair that under this proposition, the school board members that were recalled would be allowed to run again in the next election, but the mayor's appointees who replaced them would not be. Supporters of Proposition C say that special elections effectively limit voters' say, given the low turnout of these sorts of elections, and that they distract elected officials from governance. Turnout for the school board recall was 36%. They also argue that the caretaker clause makes sure a recall is a referendum on the person who is serving and not about the politics of who replaces them. So now you know about Proposition C. Keep an eye out for it on your ballot ahead of the June election.